Busan, South Korea. Today it's known as a bustling port city, famous for its stunning beaches, vibrant markets, and the Busan International Film Festival. But beneath its beauty lies a darker chapter in its history, a chapter many would rather forget. This is the story of the brothers' home. To understand the brothers' home, we must first look at South Korea during the 1970s and 1980s. The country was undergoing rapid industrialization under authoritarian regimes. As cities expanded and modernized, South Korea's government sought to clean up urban areas, especially ahead of international events like the 1988 Olympics. The goal was to remove anything that might tarnish the country's image, including vagrants, orphans, disabled individuals, and the homeless. During this period, South Korea implemented policies that gave police broad powers to round up people they deemed undesirable. They called it a crackdown on vagrants, but in reality, anyone who appeared poor, disabled, or without purpose could be taken off the streets. Many of these individuals were sent to institutions like the Brothers' Home. The Brothers' Home was established in 1975 in the hills of Busan, run by a man named Lee Jong-rak. On paper, it was a rehabilitation facility, a place where the disadvantaged could be cared for and trained to re-enter society. But behind closed doors, it was a very different story. At its peak, the Brothers' Home housed over 4,000 people, many of whom were detained against their will. They lived in squalid conditions, crammed into overcrowded rooms with barely enough food to survive. Guards subjected them to physical abuse, forced labor, and psychological torment. For some, the Brothers' Home became a living nightmare. The facility operated more like a prison camp than a rehabilitation center. Detainees were forced to work long hours in factories or on construction sites, producing goods that were sold for profit. The profits, however, didn't go to the workers. They lined the pockets of the facility's leadership. Physical abuse was rampant. Survivors have described brutal beatings, sexual violence, and deaths caused by neglect. It's estimated that hundreds of people died within the walls of the Brothers' Home, but the exact number remains unknown. The man behind the Brothers' Home, Lee Jong-rak, was initially praised by authorities for his work. He received government funding and was even awarded for his efforts to rehabilitate vagrants. But this image was a facade. Investigations later revealed how deeply complicit government officials were in enabling the abuses. By turning a blind eye, they allowed the Brothers' Home to operate unchecked for years. In 1987, the truth finally began to unravel. A whistleblower, a journalist who managed to infiltrate the facility, exposed the horrors inside the Brothers' Home. Public outrage grew, leading to investigations and the eventual closure of the facility. Lee Jong-rak was arrested, but his punishment was surprisingly light given the scale of his crimes. In 1987, the truth finally began to unravel. A whistleblower, a journalist who managed to infiltrate the facility, exposed the horrors inside the Brothers' Home. Public outrage grew, leading to investigations and the eventual closure of the facility. Lee Jong-rak was arrested, but his punishment was surprisingly light given the scale of his crimes. Today, little remains of the Brothers' Home. The facility has been demolished and the site has been repurposed. But for the survivors, the scars, both physical and emotional, remain. Many have struggled to rebuild their lives, and some have spoken out, demanding recognition and accountability. In recent years, the South Korean government has begun to confront this dark chapter. In 2018, a Truth Commission was established to investigate abuses at facilities like the Brothers' Home. While this is a step toward justice, many argue it's too little, too late. The story of the Brothers' Home is a reminder of how easily human rights can be trampled in the name of progress. It highlights the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of holding institutions accountable. Most importantly, it gives a voice to those who were silenced for so long. As we move forward, we must remember stories like this, not to dwell on the past, but to ensure it's never repeated. The survivors of the brothers' home deserve justice, and their story deserves to be told. Drop your comments below, slap that like button, and don't forget to clock that T and subscribe to Only Facts TV.